I was standing in that courtroom fighting for my daughter Lily when my ex-husband's lawyer dropped a bomb that changed everything. Your Honor, my client has evidence that Ms. Harper isn't even the biological mother of this child. I actually laughed out loud. Then he handed the judge a DNA test. The sound that came out of me wasn't dignified. It was sharp, incredulous, the kind of laugh you make when someone says something so absurd your brain can't process it any other way. Everyone in the courtroom turned to stare at me. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun, peered over her glasses with disapproval. My lawyer, Janet, placed a warning hand on my arm, but I couldn't help myself. "Is this a joke?" I said, my voice cutting through the formal atmosphere of the courtroom. "Your Honor, I gave birth to Lily 7 years ago at Riverside Memorial Hospital. I have stretch marks to prove it." But Marcus's lawyer, a man named Brennan who looked like he'd stepped out of a law firm catalog, didn't even blink. He stood there in his $1,000 suit, holding that manila envelope like it was a winning lottery ticket. His expression was all business, but I caught the hint of satisfaction in his eyes. This was his big moment, his courtroom drama, and he was savoring it. "No joke, Ms. Harper," Brennan said, his voice smooth as silk. "We have irrefutable DNA evidence that you share no biological relationship with the child you claim is your daughter." I looked across the courtroom at Marcus, my ex-husband, sitting there in his new suit that his rich wife probably bought him. He was trying to keep his face neutral, but I knew him too well. I could see the anticipation in the way he leaned forward slightly, the way his fingers drummed against his thigh. This was the same tell he had when he thought he had a winning hand at the poker table, the same expression that had cost us our savings, our home, and ultimately our marriage. "Marcus, what have you done?" I said, my voice steady despite the chaos erupting in my chest. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. His new wife, Veronica, sat beside him, with her perfectly manicured nails and designer handbag, looking like she'd just won some sort of prize. She whispered something in his ear, and he nodded slightly. Judge Coleman took the envelope from Brennan, her movements deliberate and careful. The courtroom was so quiet I could hear the paper rustling as she opened it. My heart hammered against my ribs as I watched her eyes scan the document. Her expression, previously neutral, shifted into something more serious. "Ms. Harper," Judge Coleman said, looking directly at me, "these results appear to be from a certified laboratory. They indicate that you are not the biological mother of Lily Harper. Do you want to explain this?" The room tilted. My legs felt weak, and I gripped the edge of the defendant's table to steady myself. This wasn't possible. I remembered everything about Lily's birth, the 17 hours of labor, the way she looked when they first placed her on my chest, all wrinkled and perfect in mine, the way she gripped my finger with her tiny hand. How could science say she wasn't mine when every cell in my body knew she was? "There must be a mistake," I said, but my voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. "This is impossible." Janet, my lawyer, was frantically flipping through her papers, looking for something, anything to counter this ambush. We'd prepared for everything: Marcus's gambling addiction, his missed child support payments, the 3 times he'd failed to show up for his scheduled visitations. We'd even prepared for him to lie about my parenting. But this? How do you prepare for someone to claim your child isn't yours? I turned to look at the gallery, desperate for something to anchor me to reality. That's when I saw my mother, Dorothy, sitting in the back row. She always came to support me, my rock through the divorce and everything after. But something was wrong. Her face had gone pale and her hands were clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were white. She wasn't looking at me. She was staring at the floor like she wanted it to open up and swallow her whole. "Mom?" I said, the word barely a whisper. And then, in a voice that seemed to come from somewhere deep and broken inside her, my mother stood up and spoke the words that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my life. "Because I switched her baby at birth," she said, each word dropping like a stone into still water, "to protect her." The courtroom exploded into chaos, but all I could do was stare at my mother, this woman who had held me through every crisis, who had taught me right from wrong, who had been there in the delivery room when Lily was born. The ground beneath my feet wasn't just shifting. It was gone entirely, and I was falling through space with nothing to grab onto except the impossible truth that my mother had just confessed to stealing my child and giving me someone else's. Judge Coleman banged her gavel repeatedly, calling for order, but the sound seemed to come from very far away. Marcus's lawyer was saying something about immediate custody. Janet was objecting. People were talking all at once, their voices blending into a meaningless roar. But all I could see was my mother, standing there with tears streaming down her face, finally ready to tell a truth that had been eating her alive for 7 years. And all I could think was that Lily, my baby girl, was at school right now, probably sitting in art class drawing pictures of our family with her favorite purple crayon, having no idea that everything she knew about who she was had just exploded in a courtroom 20 miles away. The morning before court started like every other morning in our small 2-bedroom apartment on Maple Street. Lily bounced into my room at 6:30 sharp, her wild curls sticking up in every direction, dragging her stuffed elephant, Mr. Peanuts, behind her. "Mommy, is today a waffle day or a pancake day?" she asked, climbing onto my bed with the determination of a mountain climber. "Definitely a waffle day," I said, pulling her into a hug. "We need extra syrup power for today." She giggled, that perfect sound that made every hard day worth it. We developed our breakfast ranking system after the divorce. Pancake days were regular days. Waffle days were when we needed extra strength. French toast days were for celebrations. It was our little way of making sense of a world that had shifted when Daddy moved out. I'd been a pediatric nurse at Children's Regional for 8 years, but I'd taken the day off for the custody hearing. My supervisor, Nancy, had been nothing but supportive through the whole ordeal. "You fight for that, baby," she'd told me. "We'll hold down the fort here." As I made breakfast, I watched Lily set the table, carefully placing each fork and napkin just so. She'd always been particular about things being in their right place. Marcus used to joke that she got that from me, back when he still noticed things about her instead of disappearing to the casino every weekend. "Mommy, why does Daddy want to take me away?" Lily asked suddenly, pouring syrup on her waffle with scientific precision. I'd practiced this answer 100 times, but it still caught in my throat. "Sometimes grown-ups disagree about what's best, sweetheart, but I promise I'll never stop fighting for you." "Will I have to live with Veronica?" She wrinkled her nose. "She smells like too much perfume and she doesn't know how to braid hair right." "No, baby, you're staying right here with me." I said it with more confidence than I felt. My lawyer, Janet Morrison, had assured me we had a strong case. Marcus had barely seen Lily since he'd married Veronica 6 months ago. He'd missed 12 of his scheduled weekend visits, always with some excuse. Work emergency, car trouble, the flu. But I knew better. I'd tracked his social media. Those weekends he was supposed to have Lily. He was in Vegas, Atlantic City, or at the new casino that had opened 2 towns over. The gambling had started small. Scratch-off tickets at the gas station, $20 on a football game. But addiction is a hungry beast, and it had devoured our marriage savings by savings. First went the vacation fund, then the emergency fund, then Lily's college fund. The night I found him on our laptop at 3 a.m., trying to take out a second mortgage on our house to cover his debts, I knew it was over. My mother had been my lifeline through it all. Dorothy Harper was 71 years old and had the energy of someone half her age. She'd retired from her position as principal of Jefferson Elementary and moved from her house in Portland to a senior living community just 10 minutes from us. "I'm not getting any younger," she'd said when she announced the move. "I want to be close to my girls." She came over 3 nights a week, teaching Lily to knit, helping with homework, making her famous pot roast that could cure any bad day. There was something different about her since the divorce proceedings started, though. A nervousness that wasn't like her. She'd always been the strongest woman I knew, the kind of person who could stare down a school board and win, who'd raised me alone after Dad died when I was 10. "You're a good mother, Rachel," she'd told me the night before court, holding my hands across my kitchen table. "Better than I ever was." "Mom, you were amazing. Are amazing." She'd looked at me strangely then, like she wanted to say something else, but Lily had run in asking for help finding her library book, and the moment passed. That last normal morning, I French braided Lily's hair the way she liked it, with the little butterfly clips at the ends. I packed her lunch with a note like I always did. Today's said, "You are braver than you believe and loved more than you know." "Grandma's picking me up after school, right?" Lily asked as I walked her to the bus stop. "That's right, and we'll all have pizza tonight to celebrate when this is over." "With extra cheese? With extra everything?" I watched the bus pull away, Lily waving from her window seat, and I felt that familiar mix of pride and protectiveness that had defined every day since she was born. Marcus could bring all the lawyers he wanted. He could make all the accusations in the world, but he couldn't change the fundamental truth that I was Lily's mother in every way that mattered. Or so I thought, standing there on that ordinary morning, having no idea that in just a few hours, my understanding of truth itself would be shattered. Looking back, I wonder if there were signs I missed. The way my mother sometimes looked at Lily with such sadness, the careful way she changed the subject whenever I talked about Lily's birth, the box of my childhood medical records she'd claimed were lost in a move, but always seemed nervous when I mentioned looking for them. But that morning, all I knew was that I had a daughter to fight for and a life to protect. I drove to the courthouse with Janet's words echoing in my head. "Just tell the truth, Rachel. The truth always wins." She had no idea how wrong she was about to be. The courthouse smelled like old wood and floor polish, the same way it had during my divorce proceedings 2 years earlier. Janet met me in the lobby, her briefcase in one hand and a reassuring smile on her face. "Ready to end this?" she asked, adjusting her navy suit jacket. "More than ready," I said, though my stomach churned with anxiety. We walked into courtroom 3B at exactly 9:45 a.m. Marcus was already there with his lawyer, both of them huddled in conversation at their table. Marcus looked different. New haircut, expensive suit, gold watch I'd never seen before. Veronica's money had transformed him into someone who could play the part of responsible father, at least on the surface. Veronica sat in the first row behind them, typing on her phone with perfectly manicured nails. She glanced up when we entered, her lips curving into what might have been a smile but looked more like a smirk. I recognized her Hermes bag and wondered how Marcus had managed to convince someone with money to marry him. Then again, he'd always been charming when he wanted something. Judge Coleman entered precisely at 10 a.m. She was the same judge who'd handled our divorce, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who had a reputation for seeing through lies and caring deeply about children's welfare. I'd felt relieved when we'd learned she'd be presiding over the custody case. "Good morning," Judge Coleman said, settling into her chair. "We're here in the matter of Harper versus Harper regarding custody of minor child Lily Harper, age 7. I've reviewed all submitted documents. Mr. Brennan, you may begin." Marcus's lawyer stood, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced ease. Thomas Brennan looked like he'd been born in a courtroom, all sharp angles and calculated movements. Marcus had somehow afforded one of the city's most aggressive family lawyers. "Your Honor, we intend to show that Ms. Rachel Harper has systematically alienated my client from his daughter and that custody should be modified to grant primary residence to Mr. Marcus Harper." Janet shot to her feet. "Objection. Mr. Harper has missed 70% of his scheduled visitations in the past 6 months." "Your Honor," Brennan continued smoothly, "those absences were due to Ms. Harper's deliberate scheduling conflicts and her poisoning the child against her father." "That's a lie," I whispered to Janet. She patted my hand, reminding me to stay quiet. "Furthermore," Brennan said, pulling out a folder, "we have concerns about Ms. Harper's fitness as a parent. She has exposed the child to inappropriate situations and has been documented making false statements about my client." He presented photos from Marcus's social media that I'd screenshot, showing him at various casinos. "Ms. Harper has been stalking my client online, demonstrating obsessive behavior. She's told their daughter that her father has a sickness, attempting to damage their relationship." "Because he does have a sickness," I muttered. Janet squeezed my arm in warning. The back and forth continued for 20 minutes. "Every point Janet made," Brennan countered with twisted half-truths. "Yes, I told Lily that Daddy had a problem that made him forget his promises sometimes. What else could I say to a 7-year-old who sat by the window waiting for a father who never showed up?" Then Brennan's entire demeanor changed. He straightened his tie and looked directly at the judge with the confidence of a man about to play his ace. Your Honor, while all of these issues are concerning, they pale in comparison to what we discovered during our investigation. He paused for effect. We have evidence that Ms. Harper has been perpetrating a fundamental fraud upon this court and my client. Janet frowned, flipping through her papers. We'd exchanged all required documents during discovery. There shouldn't have been any surprises. What kind of evidence? Judge Coleman asked, her tone sharp. Ms. Harper has claimed to be Lily Harper's biological mother. She is not. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. I felt my mouth open, but no sound came out. Janet recovered first. That's preposterous, she said. Ms. Harper gave birth to Lily on March 15, 2018 at Riverside Memorial Hospital. We have the birth certificate. Birth certificates can be falsified, Brennan said, producing a manila envelope. DNA tests cannot. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. This had to be a bluff, some kind of courtroom theatrics. But Brennan's expression was deadly serious as he approached the bench. 3 weeks ago, during my client's visitation, he took his daughter for ice cream. Some of that ice cream remained on a napkin, which was preserved and tested by a certified laboratory. Additionally, we obtained a hair sample from Ms. Harper's own trash, which is perfectly legal as abandoned property, has no expectation of privacy. You went through my trash? I stood up, ignoring Janet's attempts to pull me back down. The results are conclusive, Brennan continued, handing the envelope to the judge. Rachel Harper shares no biological relationship with the child known as Lily Harper. The probability of maternity is 0%. Judge Coleman studied the document, her expression growing more serious with each passing second. The courtroom was completely silent except for the sound of paper rustling and my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Ms. Morrison, the judge said to Janet, were you aware of this situation? No, Your Honor, this is the first we're hearing of any DNA test. We question its authenticity and chain of custody. The test was performed by Genelab Diagnostics, a court-approved facility, Brennan said. We have full documentation of the chain of custody. Judge Coleman looked at me over her glasses. Ms. Harper, these results indicate you share no biological relationship with the child. Can you explain this? The room started to spin. This wasn't possible. I remembered everything about Lily's birth, the epidural that only worked on one side, the way the bright hospital lights hurt my eyes, the moment they placed her on my chest, still slippery and screaming, the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. There must be a mistake, I said, my voice sounding strange and distant. This is impossible. Judge Coleman, I carried her for 9 months. I was in labor for 14 hours. I remember every moment. But even as I said it, something cold settled in my stomach. Because across the courtroom, Marcus wasn't surprised. He was leaning back in his chair with the satisfied expression of a gambler who'd just hit the jackpot. My legs gave out and I sank into my chair, the courtroom spinning around me like a carnival ride. Janet was on her feet, objecting to everything she could think of, but her words sounded muffled and far away. All I could focus on was that piece of paper in Judge Coleman's hands, those impossible words that couldn't be true. Your Honor, Janet said, her professional composure cracking slightly, we request an immediate recess to review this alleged evidence and consult with my client. Denied, Judge Coleman said. Mr. Brennan, explain the relevance of this DNA test to the custody matter at hand. Brennan practically glowed with victory. Your Honor, if Ms. Harper has been deceiving everyone about her relationship to this child, it calls into question everything about this case. My client has been paying child support for a child who isn't even related to his ex-wife. This is fraud of the highest order. That's my daughter! The words tore out of me before I could stop them. I don't care what some paper says. I'm the one who's been there every single day. I'm the one who holds her when she has nightmares. I'm the one who taught her to tie her shoes and read her first words. Emotional outbursts won't change scientific facts, Brennan said coldly. Judge Coleman raised her hand for silence. Miss Harper, I need you to explain how this is possible. If you gave birth to this child as you claim, how do you account for these test results? I looked at Janet helplessly. She seemed just as lost as I was, shuffling through papers as if the answer might be hidden in our case files. My mind raced through possibilities, each more impossible than the last. Had there been a mix-up at the hospital? But no, I'd never let Lily out of my sight those first days. She'd roomed in with me, nursing every 2 hours like clockwork. I can't explain it, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But I know I gave birth to her. I know she's mine. Knowledge and biological facts are two different things, Brennan interjected. Your Honor, given this revelation, we move for immediate transfer of custody to my client. Clearly, Ms. Harper has no legal standing as this child's parent. That's insane. Janet slammed her hand on the table. Even if these results are accurate, which we dispute, Rachel Harper is the only mother this child has ever known. You can't just rip a 7-year-old away from her mother based on a DNA test. She's not the mother, Brennan said. That's the entire point. Judge Coleman was studying me with an expression I couldn't read. The silence stretched on, broken only by the hum of the fluorescent lights and someone coughing in the gallery. That's when I heard it. A sound from the back of the courtroom. A sharp intake of breath, like someone had been punched in the stomach. I turned to look at the gallery. My mother was standing up, her hand gripping the back of the bench in front of her. She was trembling, her face pale as paper, and tears were streaming down her cheeks. "Mom," I said, confused by her reaction. "Are you okay?" She didn't answer me. Instead, she looked directly at Judge Coleman and spoke in a voice I'd never heard before. Broken, desperate, full of a pain that had been carried for far too long. "Your Honor," she said, "may I address the court?" Judge Coleman frowned. "Ma'am, are you a witness in this case?" "I'm Rachel's mother, Dorothy Harper." She took a shaky breath. "And I need to tell the truth." Brennan started to object, but Judge Coleman silenced him with a look. "Continue, Mrs. Harper." My mother walked forward slowly, like each step required enormous effort. She passed our table without looking at me, though I reached out to touch her arm. She felt cold, fragile, like she might shatter at any moment. "The DNA test is accurate," she said, and my heart stopped. "Rachel didn't give birth to Lily." "Mom, what are you talking about?" My voice cracked. "You were there. You were in the delivery room with me." She finally looked at me then, and the guilt in her eyes was devastating. "I'm so sorry, baby. I've carried this for 7 years, and I can't let you suffer for my choice anymore." Judge Coleman leaned forward. "Mrs. Harper, what exactly are you saying?" My mother straightened her shoulders, gathering the same strength I'd seen her use to face down school board budgets and difficult parents. But this time, she was facing something much harder. "I switched the babies," she said clearly. "I switched my daughter's baby at birth to protect her." The courtroom erupted. Marcus shot to his feet. Veronica gasped. Brennan was saying something about criminal charges. Janet grabbed my arm as if to keep me anchored to reality. But I just sat there, staring at my mother, unable to process what she'd just said. "Order!" Judge Coleman banged her gavel repeatedly. "I will have order in this courtroom." When the noise finally died down, she fixed my mother with a stern look. "Mrs. Harper, do you understand what you're admitting to? This is a serious criminal confession." "I understand," my mother said quietly. "But my daughter doesn't deserve to lose her child because of what I did. Let me explain, please." Judge Coleman nodded slowly. "Given the extraordinary nature of this revelation, I'll allow it. But Mrs. Harper, I strongly advise you to consult with an attorney before you say anything further." "I don't need an attorney," my mother said. "I need to finally tell the truth." She turned to look at me, and in her eyes I saw not the strong, capable woman who'd raised me, but someone who'd been drowning in a secret for 7 long years. "Rachel, when you were 7 years old, Lily's age, you almost died." The words hit me like physical blows. I remembered being sick as a child, spending time in the hospital, but the details had always been fuzzy. Mom had always changed the subject when I asked about it. You had a rare genetic condition, she continued. The doctors said if you ever had children, there was a 70% chance they'd inherit it. They said any child of yours would likely suffer tremendously and might not survive past their first year. But I got better, I said weakly. I was fine. You did get better, but the genetic marker remained. When you got pregnant, I was terrified. I watched you plan for that baby, saw how happy you were, and I couldn't bear to tell you the truth. I kept hoping the doctors were wrong. My mind was reeling, trying to piece together fragments of memory. The pregnancy had been normal. No one had mentioned any genetic issues. Had she hidden test results? Lied to my doctors? When you went into labor, my mother continued, I was there. And in the same ward, there was another woman, Nina. She was young, alone, no family. She was in the room next to yours. Shut up, Marcus, I said, whirling to face him. Just shut up for once in your life. He had the decency to look uncomfortable. Rachel, I didn't know it would be this. I just thought maybe you'd had an affair or something. Veronica's cousin mentioned your mom acting weird at the hospital years ago, and we thought a DNA test might show something. I never imagined this. You were fishing for dirt to hurt me, and you found a tragedy instead, I said. Are you happy now? You've just blown up Lily's entire world to win a custody battle for a child you don't even visit. Veronica stood up suddenly. Marcus, we should withdraw the custody petition. What? Marcus and Brennan said in unison. She looked genuinely shaken. This isn't what we wanted. That little girl doesn't deserve to have her life destroyed because we were trying to reduce child support payments. This is sick. Judge Coleman banged her gavel. Everyone sit down. We need to address the immediate legal ramifications of this confession. She looked at my mother. Mrs. Harper, I'm obligated to report your confession to the authorities. You'll likely be arrested. I understand, my mother said. As for the custody matter, the judge continued, this is unprecedented in my courtroom. However, certain facts remain clear. Ms. Rachel Harper has been Lily's sole consistent caregiver for 7 years. Mr. Marcus Harper has been largely absent. The biological origins of the child, while legally complex, don't change the reality of who has acted as this child's parent. She paused, seeming to weigh her words carefully. Biology alone doesn't make someone a parent. Presence does, care does, love does. While this revelation will require extensive legal review, I'm not prepared to traumatize a 7-year-old child by removing her from the only mother she's ever known based on a deception she had no part in. Your Honor, Brennan started. Mr. Brennan, your client came here seeking custody of a child he's barely seen in 6 months. The fact that neither he nor Miss Harper shares biological ties to the child doesn't change his abandonment. It merely complicates an already difficult situation. Judge Coleman looked directly at me. Miss Harper, you'll need to retain a family law attorney experienced in adoption and custody matters. There will be investigations, possibly criminal charges against your mother, and certainly a review of Lily's legal status. But for now, Lily remains in your custody. This court is adjourned pending further investigation. The gavel came down with finality. My mother was immediately approached by 2 bailiffs. She didn't resist, didn't even look surprised. She'd known this was coming when she stood up to speak. As they prepared to take her into custody, she looked at me one last time. I'm sorry, Rachel, but I'm not sorry I saved you both. You are Lily's real mother in every way that matters. Don't let anyone tell you different. Then she was gone, led away in handcuffs, and I was left standing in a courtroom that had just witnessed the complete destruction of everything I thought I knew about my life. My mother's voice grew steadier as she continued her confession, as if finally releasing this secret gave her strength. The courtroom remained silent, everyone hanging on her every word. Nina went into labor 2 hours after you did, she said. I could hear her through the walls, crying out with no one to hold her hand. The nurses were overwhelmed that night. There had been a multi-car accident and the emergency section was chaos. I kept going between your room and hers, bringing her ice chips, telling her she was doing great. I remembered none of this. The pain medication and exhaustion had made everything blurry. All I remembered was pushing, Marcus complaining about missing a game, and then Lily's first cry. Your baby was born first, my mother continued. A little girl. The moment I saw her, I knew something was wrong. She had the same symptoms you'd had as a baby. The mottled skin, the labored breathing. The nurses whisked her away to the NICU before you could even hold her properly. No, I whispered. I held Lily. I remember holding her. You held a baby, my mother said gently, but not the one you gave birth to. Nina's daughter was born 40 minutes later. Healthy, perfect, 8 pounds of pure life, but Nina hemorrhaged badly. They rushed her to surgery. Judge Coleman interrupted. Mrs. Harper, are you telling this court that you deliberately switched 2 newborns? I am, my mother said, lifting her chin. While the nurses were dealing with the emergency, I was alone with both babies. Your biological daughter in the NICU, fighting for every breath. Nina's healthy daughter in the nursery. I stood there between those 2 rooms, and I made a choice that has haunted me every day since. You stole someone's baby? Marcus's voice cut through the courtroom. You stole a baby and gave it to Rachel? Nina died, my mother said quietly. She never came out of surgery. The nurses found a note in her belongings. She had no family, no one listed as next of kin. She'd written that if anything happened to her, she wanted her baby to be adopted by a loving family. So you decided to play God? Brennan demanded. My mother turned to face him. I decided to save my daughter from a lifetime of grief. Rachel's biological child died 3 days later. The genetic condition was aggressive and untreatable. If I hadn't switched them, Rachel would have buried her daughter before she ever left the hospital. I felt like I was drowning. Every memory of Lily's first days was now tainted, twisted. The nurses bringing her to me to breastfeed, her first diaper change, Marcus holding her awkwardly, joking about her tiny fingers, all of it built on a lie. The hospital records, Janet said suddenly. There would be records of all this. Death certificates, NICU admissions. I was on the hospital board for 15 years, my mother said. I knew how the system worked, where the gaps were. It was a chaotic night. Papers get mixed up. Babies get switched accidentally all the time, though usually they're caught quickly. I just made sure this one wasn't caught. This is insane, I said, standing up on shaky legs. You're telling me my actual child died? That Lily belongs to some woman named Nina who's also dead? That for 7 years I've been raising a stolen baby? Not stolen, my mother said firmly. Saved. Both of you were saved. Lily from growing up in foster care, you from losing a child. I gave 2 broken situations a chance at wholeness. Judge Coleman cleared her throat. Mrs. Harper, whatever your motivations, you've confessed to multiple serious crimes. Fraud, kidnapping, falsifying medical records. I'm aware, my mother said. I'm prepared to face the consequences, but please don't punish Rachel and Lily for my choices. Rachel has been a wonderful mother. Lily is happy, loved, thriving. Biology doesn't erase 7 years of genuine love and care. Marcus's lawyer saw his opening. Your Honor, this changes everything. My client has been defrauded on multiple levels. He's been paying child support for a child that isn't biologically his or his ex-wife's. This entire custody case is built on a fundamental lie. 3 months later, I sat with Lily in our favorite spot at Riverside Park, watching her feed breadcrumbs to the ducks. The same curls that had been wild that morning in court were now neatly braided, adorned with the butterfly clips she loved. She looked so normal, so untouched by the chaos that had exploded around her, but I knew better. Children understand more than we give them credit for. Mom, is Grandma coming to my birthday party? She asked, tossing another piece of bread into the pond. My throat tightened. Grandma can't come this year, sweetheart. Remember what we talked about? She made a big mistake and has to face consequences. Because she switched babies when I was born? We'd told her the truth, slowly, carefully, with the help of Dr. Martinez, a child psychologist who specialized in adoption and family trauma. Lily had taken it better than any of us expected, mainly concerned about whether this meant she had to change her name or move away. That's right, I said, pulling her close, but it doesn't change anything about us. I'm still your mom, and you're still my daughter. Forever? She asked, looking up at me with those brown eyes that I now knew came from a woman named Nina. Forever and always, I promised. The legal aftermath had been a tsunami. My mother was serving 2 years probation after pleading guilty to fraud and falsification of records. The prosecutor had considered kidnapping charges but ultimately decided against them, given Nina's death and the letter she'd left hoping for adoption. It helped that Judge Coleman had written a letter to the court describing the unique circumstances of the case. I'd had to legally adopt Lily, a surreal process of becoming the official mother to the child I'd raised since birth. The court had required DNA tests, background checks, home visits. Even though nothing about our daily life had changed, Janet had connected me with a brilliant adoption attorney named Sarah Chen, who'd guided us through every step. "You're lucky," Sarah had told me during one of our meetings. "The biological father is unknown. Nina had no family to contest the adoption, and you have 7 years of parenting history. It's complicated, but not impossible." Marcus had dropped the custody case entirely. Veronica had filed for divorce within a week of the hearing, apparently deciding that a man who would weaponize a child's identity wasn't someone she wanted to be married to. He still paid child support, though now it came with complicated feelings. Lily wasn't biologically his, but he'd signed the birth certificate and acted as her father for 5 years before the divorce. The law still considered him financially responsible. He'd asked to see her once since the revelation. I'd agreed, supervised by Dr. Martinez. Lily had been polite but distant, more interested in the playground than in reconnecting with the father who'd vanished from her life. He hadn't asked again. The hardest part was reconciling my feelings about my mother. The woman who'd taught me right from wrong had lied to me for 7 years. She'd stolen my right to grieve my biological child, stolen Nina's final moments with her daughter, stolen the truth from everyone involved. But she'd also given me Lily, given Lily a family. The grief and gratitude were so tangled together, I couldn't separate them. I'd visited her once at her apartment, now wearing an ankle monitor as part of her probation. "I need to know about my biological daughter," I'd said. "I need to know everything." She'd pulled out a small box she'd hidden for 7 years. Inside was a single photograph of a tiny baby in the NICU, hooked to machines fighting for life, a death certificate with the name Baby Girl Harper, a small knitted hat, the only thing my biological child had ever worn. "I called her Hope in my mind," my mother had said quietly. "She lived for 3 days. The nurses said she wasn't in pain at the end. She just slipped away." I'd cried then, grieving for a child I'd never known I'd lost. But when I got home that night, Lily had run to greet me, full of stories about school and friends and the science project she was excited about. Living, breathing, real, mine in every way that mattered. "Mom, look!" Lily called out, pointing to a family of ducks swimming together. "The babies are following their mama." "They always do," I said, smiling despite everything. A year ago, I thought I knew what family meant. DNA, blood, biological connections that couldn't be broken. But now I understood that family was more complex than that. It was showing up every day. It was choosing to love even when the truth was messy. It was French braiding hair and leaving notes in lunchboxes and holding your child through nightmares and celebrating their victories. My mother had committed crimes in the name of love. Marcus had revealed devastating truths in the name of spite. But at the end of it all, Lily and I were still here, still together, still family. Not because of DNA, but because of choice. Every single day we chose each other. "Ready to go home?" I asked Lily as the sun started to set. "Can we stop for ice cream?" she asked, using the smile that always worked on me. "Just this once," I said, knowing full well it wouldn't be just this once. As we walked hand in hand toward the ice cream shop, I thought about Nina, the woman I'd never met but who had given me the greatest gift of my life. I'd started a small scholarship fund in her name at the local community college for young mothers pursuing their education. It felt like the right thing to do, a way to honor her memory and the daughter she'd never gotten to raise. The truth hadn't set us free in the way people always say it will. Instead, it had shattered us and forced us to rebuild, with pieces that didn't quite fit the same way. But sometimes the cracks are where the light gets in. Sometimes a family forged in difficult truths is stronger than one built on comfortable lies. That night, as I tucked Lily into bed with Mr. Peanuts, she asked me the same question she'd been asking every night since the court hearing. "Are you still my real mom?" And I gave her the same answer I'd give her every night until she stopped needing to ask. I'm your real mom in every way that matters. And that's the only truth we need. If this story touched your heart or made you think about the complex nature of family and love, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Your support helps these important stories reach more people. Drop a comment below sharing your thoughts on what makes a family real. Is it DNA or is it something more? I'd love to hear your perspective. And if you want more emotional, thought-provoking stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Thank you for being part of our storytelling community. Until next time, remember that love isn't about perfect beginnings, it's about choosing to stay.